Welcome to the Low Carb MD Podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope. Nothing said on the Low Carb MD Podcast is medical advice. Please consult your own doctor before making any lifestyle changes.
Welcome to the Low Carb MD Podcast. I am super excited, and I know Brian is so upset because Brian is missing a great guest today, and he expresses his sorrow. He was like, "Oh my God, I'm so upset. I'm not going to be there to interview Florence Christophers, who is an absolute warrior in this space, who's put on 10 years of the Kick Sugar Summit that I've been a part of, that I've been honored to be a part of, along with so many other luminaries. She is a certified health coach. She is certified in handling patients with food addiction and sugar addiction, and she is an absolute beast. And we were just talking off air about how important it is that we all keep fighting to get our communities, our families, our society healthy again. We were talking about how it's so important to make this something that's a long sustained movement, because everybody deserves metabolic health. Nobody deserves, type 1 patients are dying 10 years before they should. People with obesity are dying 6 years before they should. People with diabetes are dying 7 years before they should. And people with addictions die 12 years before they should. And so we were just talking off air on how important it is and how we all need your support. We really need your support, right? The food companies are getting support from a bunch of people, and the pharmaceutical companies are getting support from a bunch of people. They have lots of customers. So you don't even have to pay. That's the good part. We have a free Kick Sugar Summit, and it's coming very, very soon, October 7th to 14th, with the most brilliant people in this space. So please, please, please tune in. And if you can't make it, or there's a there's a lecturer that you couldn't listen to, or there's somebody you really wanted to check in with, like Jason Fung or Robert Lustig, right? And there's somebody that you couldn't listen because it was live and you couldn't make it. Well, then go support the Kick Sugar Summit, buy the package so you can watch all these lectures and get all the show notes and get a bunch of free cool stuff. I'm going to, I have no financial relationship. Florence, have you paid me?
No.
No, I accepted no, I don't take honorariums. I don't do kickbacks, right? So this is a legitimate 100% conflict-free recommendation. It's an amazing summit, and you all should go support her. Florence, thank you so much for joining us. Sorry about that long introduction.
No problem. My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I let's pick up where our conversation went, because I think eventually we can get to the summit. We can get to I'd love to hear sort of how you got started in the space and why you're so passionate about food addiction and sugar addiction. But we were talking about metabolic health is starting to go mainstream, right? It's starting to go mainstream. RFK is talking about it. He wrote a big op-ed, Make America Healthy Again. We were talking about Robert Lustig and Phil Ovadia doing a news conference yesterday, and the dietitians were eviscerated and they're starting to wake up. And you were talking about how your sort of hopes for the space, and let's just start there.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like I've waited my whole life, decades and decades, for somebody like RFK to come up and say, we can do this and we need to do this and we need to turn this around. So I feel like we have a thought leader in the political space that's starting to say we need to put policies in place. We need to wake up. We're poisoning not just ourselves, but our children. And I think that I think that says that we're ready. We're ready as a country, as a, the whole world is affected by the ultra processed foods. So I hope it's a sign that we're at a tipping point and that together we can start to make the changes we need to make in our own lives, with our families, with our communities, and our workspaces, because this is a beast of a problem. Like every time I'm in a grocery store, the people in front of me and the grocery carts behind me are loaded with junk. And I think, how do they not know? Like, I'm in a bubble. Like, how do they not know that those beautiful two children that are sitting there in their car eating junk and like, how do they not know how much harm they're doing to their children? They don't.
I think you're absolutely right. There's a little bit of a lack of awareness on this issue. And I think obesity and diabetes, first of all, let's talk about it because you brought it up. Obesity and diabetes are a trillion-dollar problem for this population. If you're looking at it from the top down, forget about, the early deaths, the morbidity, the amputations, the disease, the cancer, the heart disease. It is suffering. And there is such a disconnect at the level of the common everyday person that food can actually cause problems. And the right food can actually fix the problems. And I agree with you. It's so important that we're starting to talk about it in the public space, and it's sort of making the news, the 6 o'clock news. They're talking about metabolic health. I mean, does that light a bit of a fire under your butt? Does that make, I know you've been doing this 10 years, and I know you've been working so hard on the summit year after year. And we were talking about this offline, and gosh, like we need some wind in our sails, but I know there's still fire left in you and fight left in you. So tell me about that. And
Well,
maybe tell me about where that all came from.
yeah, I'll take you back there. I was a child that was born and raised on junk food and, sugary cereals, waffles, toast, French toast. My lunches were sometimes white bread, kid you not, with butter. Thank God, at least it wasn't margarine. With brown sugar, or it was chocolate sprinkles. And I would roll the white bread and chew it like a little sort of, I don't know how to describe it. It was a rolled up little sandwich that was my lunches, and snacks in between, and orange juice and ice cream and pizza. And it was junk all day long. So no surprise. I struggled as a child with energy and overwhelm, and like I just wasn't well. There was a lot of antibiotics, just passed out, getting all the colds and flus going around. But it wasn't really until my late teens, and I was sick, and I knew it. And in and out of doctors' offices, I had blinding migraines. At that point, I was really overweight. I was getting horrible acne. It was ruining my life, but I didn't know what the problem was, and neither did the doctors. By the time I hit my early 20s, I was suicidally depressed. Truly, I just wanted to die. Mostly when I had my migraines. I was lying in the dark going, how is it possible that my head can hurt this much? Doctor's file was like this, just more pharmaceuticals. We'll try this. We're going to find the right solution. Hang in there, Florence. We'll find the right drug. We're going to do some MRIs on your head. But they weren't finding the solution. And eventually one day, a friend of mine slipped me a copy of the book called The Sugar Blues. And I looked at the book and I thought, what the heck has sugar got to do with my migraines? That is the stupidest thing. As if that has anything to do with my migraines. But months passed and I threw the book in the back of my student dorm room. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Every doctor I've ever asked, is there anything I'm doing? Is there anything I'm eating? And they all reassured me it's not, it's genetic, it's just bad luck, but we'll just find the right cocktail of, pharmaceuticals. We'll figure this out. So I had dismissed the idea that food can be that impactful, that tied to both my mood and my mental health and my physical health. But one day when I was really sick, I went back and I'm like, what if what if it's like sugar? So I read the book in 2 days. It was absolutely gripping and riveting. And if you haven't read the book, it is still a classic. It's called The Sugar Blues by William Duffy. Changed my life. I was never, ever again the same person. It's one of those, BC and AD type moments. Like, you are not the same person after. I was not the same person after I read that book. A light bulb went on and I went, oh my Lord, it's the crap I'm eating all day long. So this was like 1987, 1988. So pre-internet, no books, no one was talking about this. So like, I started out on this path all by myself. And for years, I was on my path completely by myself, making a ton of mistakes. I would go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. And then I would think, oh, it's been a few, I could have a little, making every mistake in the book. Eventually, though, I got traction. I had more days of eating only whole foods and less days in the ditch. And over time, I lost weight. I took up running. My mood stabilized. Once I fully got off the ultra processed foods, I have never had depression. Doesn't mean I don't have bad days. It doesn't mean that life's all rosy and peaches and cream, but I don't have depression anymore. I rarely have migraines. They were 80, 90% improved. I'll take it. It was amazing what it did. But the piece that was still, the piece that was still incredible to me is that, why was no one else talking about this? Like, this is incredible. Like, the power of getting off of the processed foods and onto the whole foods. And so I think today, what puts my fire under my belly is that I know the biggest barrier to most people discovering the power of whole foods to feel great and to reverse and prevent chronic disease is that they're doing what I did, which is vastly underestimating the benefits of reducing, if not completely eliminating, processed junk foods. And they vastly overestimate their doctor's capacity to manage their chronic diseases, the diseases that are literally caused, because of a lack of self-care, starting with nutrition.
You
And
know
then
what? I have to just stop on this point because I sensed some hesitation in your voice when you said their doctor's inability to manage chronic disease. And I'm sorry, but you're absolutely right. You are absolutely correct. And as a physician, it pains me to agree with you because I truly feel like we're in a failed profession. And I don't think doctors are asking themselves about the everyday poisons, right? The everyday poisons, we have a epidemic of arthritis, right? And we're not thinking about how we're driving, sitting at our desks all day, looking at screens all day, how we position ourselves. The food we eat. We have an epidemic of diabetes and obesity. But the food, the lack of activity, and instead they're handing out pills in 7-minute visits, and it's such a disservice, and I think you're right. But do you think we'll wake up people before we wake up the doctors? I'm just curious on what you think,
I
who
think
will be easier to wake up?
I think there's a lot of people who have woken up, and I think there's a lot of doctors who have woken up, and I think the doctors are trapped in a system that if they leave it, they take pay cuts, they run the risk of the hassle of the online hustle. They're no longer necessarily covered by insurance companies. They're in a rock and a hard spot, but I think there's a lot more doctors that know for chronic disease, the brilliance of the mainstream medical system is in emergency care. Brilliant. Frickin' you can put a finger back on people. You can take out heart surgeries. It's unbelievable how brilliant we are, how brilliant the mainstream medical system is with emergencies, and how incompetent and frustrated doctors feel with just passing out pills that their patients just keep coming back. You know that if you choose the path of overestimating that pharmaceuticals and surgeries are the solution to your health conditions, When you overestimate that, it's just a matter of time before you realize, wow, now I have another medication. You are committing to a lifelong journey of increasing medications, and for many, many, many people, crippling medical debt. It is the number one cause of bankruptcies in America. 66.3% of bankruptcies are because people are crippled with medical debt. And how much of those and they're not even really being helped. It's just another pill, another pill, another pill. But the simple, elegant solution of just getting back to the basics with food, starting with the food, because if you can get that right, if you can leverage the healing power of whole foods, I consider the work that we're doing in our space to be, we're food medicine healers. We're food medicine healers, and it really is a powerful medicine. And I would say start there for most of us. Then you start to have better energy, and then you start to want to move. You don't even have to force it. Your body wakes up and says, hey, let's go for a walk, let's go for a run, and it will happen. And then, you can start to look at your sleep and your stress levels, and the future of healthcare is self-care, because the majority of the issues that we're dealing with are chronic. They're related to that we've lost our way in terms of the basic needs of our body.
I think you hit the nail on the head. What is the basic need of this organism? Each organ, the brain, the body, the muscles, the bones, the hormonal systems, right? The neurotransmitters. What does it need? Right? It needs real food. It needs sleep. It needs stress reduction. Right? It needs it can't have chronic stress. Acute stress is fine, like exercise and, but chronic stress is not tenable, right? And, it's the everyday poisons. I'm sorry to say it. We have to recognize and address the everyday poisons, whether it's, emotional stress, right? Whether it's lack of sunlight or lack of movement, whether it's, the biggest elephant in the room here, and sorry for the pun, but it's the food.
Mm-hmm.
It is the food. I got to ask you a question. So, your story of being depressed and migraines and, and gosh, nearly suicidal. It was like, I just think to myself, like, where was your medical team? Where were your doctors? Where were they? And you're going to see doctors, and it's interesting. Now we know, right? We know that a ketogenic diet is useful in intractable migraines. It's an amazing intervention for migraine prevention and the treatment of migraines. And certainly we have similar data for mental health. Don't you wish somebody like Chris Palmer or Angela Stanton existed, back then?
Totally.
And I just I wonder, like, what did it feel like back then? In terms of the help you had. Did you, like?
Yeah. I felt that the doctors were in my corner. They were taking me seriously. They could see I was motivated. I was young. I was keen. I was trying to feel better. But, they'd say, here, try this antidepressant. We've heard this one can help with migraine. And, so here, we're going to give you T3s now. And at a certain point, T3s were Tylenol plus codeine. And codeine is sort of in the morphine, heroin. It's an opiate. And at one point, they decided to just have an open prescription. I could go to the pharmacy and get as many T3s as I wanted. And I did. And I didn't ever abuse them. I hated the feeling of what my body felt like on them. I felt like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. It was sort of starting to reduce the dull, horrible pounding in my head and the nausea. I didn't take the nausea off. That was another pill. That was like a Gravel or something. But it just, I knew I wasn't getting better. They knew I wasn't getting better. But they just held out the hope. They too were overestimating that there was a pill for my ill, and we never found it.
Faith in medicine and faith in science. I think it's such a folly, really, And I just am putting myself in there. Like, so now we're both sort of healthcare practitioners, and I just can't help but relate to you, like wanting to become as a profession, the person you needed,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, and I'm curious to hear that story. I mean, I'm so amazed by you. I'm so impressed by you. Like I feel like you're up there in Canada doing all of this, right? And Canada, right? I got it right, right? You're up in
Yeah.
Canada, yeah, yeah. Um, and you're doing all of this, and I feel like you're this silo of just amazingness.
Oh,
And you've been doing this for so long, and I want to understand how you went from a sick, depressed, chronically ill person to I have to heal the world, and I have to have an impact on the world. And
wow.
I need to make a living doing it, which is the unfortunate part, right?
Yes.
But yeah, but I want to hear that transition a bit. Do you mind just
I would love to share those highlights because I think there's these little moments where, yes, 2 or 3 like really pivotal moments on that part. It's a shock that it took me this long to make the decision and commitment to work specifically in this space. Why I didn't get here sooner, I have absolutely no idea. I should have been hitting here, well into my early 20s, but in my early 20s, so I think I was around 20 when I read The Sugar Blues and I'm muddling my way forward. I remember saying to my friend Remco, oh my goodness, I think I'm addicted to sugar. I think I'm addicted to sugar. I am so motivated. I'm so freaking excited to see if getting rid of sugar, and at that point, it was just sugar on my mind, to see if it can help me feel better. And my friend Remco looked at me and he's like, oh my God, Florence, you're so funny. And he slapped his thigh and he's like, that's hilarious. You can't be addicted to sugar. You need that to live. Right? Like everyone was like, that's crazy, Florence. But I started to be like really annoying evangelical, like these, not what I would do today. Like, don't eat that. That stuff's poison. And people were just like, shut up. I'm eating my whatever, right? Leave me alone. You're crazy. So all on my own, all on my own. And then eventually the very first book came out. It was Dr. Kathleen Des Maisons. And her book was called Sugar Addiction, something sugar addiction. It'll come to me. Anyways, I shouldn't ever forget the title because that was the first book where I thought, oh my Lord, there's someone else talking about this, researching it, like legitimizing it, adding the science to it. So I took that book and I recall hugging it and falling asleep with it. Like I was no longer alone in this world talking about this topic. And that gave me just before I found that book, I had realized that this stuff there has to be some kind of addictive hook to it because I would have dropped it. If it was broccoli and I was as motivated as I was to just not eat sugar,
to
it
not
should
have
have been
migraines, to not be depressed, to not
right.
be like you're motivated, right? And you're like
Yes.
that something doesn't add up here, right?
Something doesn't add up here. It shouldn't be this hard. Why is it this hard to give up? I understand it's in everything. And it took me months and months and months to figure out, what do I eat? Like, what? That has sugar? What is there left to eat? Now, of course, I understand there's an entire world of amazing whole foods to eat, but that took me a while to figure out. I figured it out. But then I kept going back. I kept going, what is going on here? I know that's going to trigger a migraine. It's barely worth the pleasure of it all, or the convenience, or the comfort. So I figured out, I think sugar can be addictive. I think it's obviously harmful mentally and physically. And I want to unpack this. And I wonder if it's implicated in eating disorders, because at that point, I felt like I had given myself a disordered eating problem. I was obsessing about it. I had gone from eating it all day long, grazing, to binging. I was like, this is getting worse.
But so the binging is like I want to like pause. I'm sorry, I'm like a New Yorker interrupting. Here I am again. But so now you're like, this is a problem, but you're trying to reduce a truly addictive substance, right? So the binging is a consequence of needing to reduce.
the binging, I think, was a consequence of exactly me not understanding that what I'm dealing with is an addiction and it requires a different mindset. That this idea of being able to sort of white knuckle our way from this, I can't white knuckle my way into a future of peace with not eating processed foods. I have to understand these foods hijack me and that it is love and peace to just, I'm not tangoing with you anymore. This is a breakup, right? And that shift allowed me to move into a much more peaceful kind of path forward to stay the course. So I'm thinking there's something going on here. So I decided to do my master's on the topic. And I applied to Trinity College, Dublin, Ireland, because a girlfriend of mine had just graduated from there. And I went over to visit her, and it was so beautiful and so exciting. And I thought this would be, and I went to the departments, and there was a department that was interdisciplinary. I did a master's in philosophy, and they said, sure, we'll accept you. I get there, and they say, interesting thesis. Show us your research. What have you got? And I was lit up, Dr. Tro. I was like, oh my gosh, only is like the 20-year-old passion kind of lit up, right? And I'm like, okay, there's a reference in this book called White, Pure and Deadly by Dr. Yudkin. And I looked up all of his references and I wrote away to all the different universities, old school, where they had to mail stuff. Anyways, I had it all collected, and I said there was a 1968. There was a study done at Laval University on these mice, and they took these mice away from their mothers, and they peeped. They had separation distress, and they measured how many times they peeped in 1 minute, and then they administered sugar to see how many times they peep in 1 minute, and it dropped from 300 to 75. And the researchers said, hey, wait a minute, what is this stuff? This seems like it's acting like an opiate. That was their working hypothesis. So then what they did is they were like, well, if it is truly an opiate, the gold standard test of whether or not a substance is acting like an opiate in the brain, a drug in the brain, is if we put in naltrexone. Naltrexone, have I got that right? Naltrexone. And
Yes, correct.
that will block the opiate receptors, and those mice should go back to peeping as many times as they did before. Lo and behold. And they concluded in this paper, sugar appears to be an opiate-like, drug-like substance that is somehow moderating pain, at least in this study. And so I was like sharing all this cool little bits of science that was available back then. And the committee was trying to figure out who was going to be the best supervisor and whether or not this thesis was going to be accepted. You could see them scratching their head and like crossing their arms. And they said, listen, we're going to meet again. We'll come back next week. And when we met the following week, they said, yeah, you can't do this thesis, not at this institution. And I was like, why? Why? You accepted me. And they're like, yeah, no, there's no evidence to suggest that sugar is harmful, and certainly no evidence to suggest that sugar is addictive. You're going to have to pick another topic. And the very last thing, there was a man, and I think I don't know where he was from.
What year was this? What year?
This was 1992.
Holy crap. I would have been like livid.
I
would have been
devastated.
Yeah. And especially having gone what you've been through and feeling health like you had felt, to want to share that and study it.
Yeah, because I was onto something and I knew it. Like, I'm onto something here. Trust me, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, tell
me they got funding. I bet you they had funding. I bet you. What institution was it? No?
No, I really don't think so. I honestly believe that people are just like, that's crazy. The very final thing, one of the gentlemen of the panel had said is, you will not embarrass this institution with this topic.
Wow.
And I just thought, you guys, I'm cutting it. I was so ahead of my time. I truly was. So
we should find those people now today.
I know. They're overweight, they're sick, they're tired, they've awakened. They're like, that woman, I remember all those years ago, and she was so passionate. She was so sure she was onto something. Well, look at that. She really was. So I've been on this path for a very long time, but I'll tell you one of the really
So wait, I'm sorry, I interrupted like a New Yorker. So here you are facing adversity, the ivory tower shooting you down, right? The authoritarian ivory tower, the universities, right? They're shooting you down. What do you like? How are you processing? Like, this is you in your youth, having seen what you've seen. I mean, clearly you didn't give up,
No.
but what happens?
Well, I actually went back and I was really devastated, but they just said, you'll find another topic. You're here, find another topic that you're interested in. So I had to sort of like figure that piece out. And it was a very, oh my, I don't even want to tell you what my thesis topic was. It was near and dear to me in a different way. I did my undergraduate in philosophy. I did my master's in philosophy. I've always been very interested in the big question. What are we doing here? What's this life all about? So I studied Plato, Plato's Cave, and did a rereading of it. Anyways, a spiritual rereading of it. But I digress. So at that point, I sort of made like I don't know, like a promise in my heart that I was going to do a documentary on this topic. That was my next thing. I thought, okay, I'm not going to do my master's on this. When I get back to Canada, I'm going to do a documentary on this topic because I know I'm onto something here. I've lived it. I've read so, and then 2 years later, Dr. Kathleen Day Maison's book comes out, and now I'm not alone in the world. And I know this isn't crazy. We're small numbers of people talking about this, but I know I just knew it was a really big issue. And then I started to see it everywhere. You can see people eating it and being sick, and I could see kids having meltdowns. And I mostly wanted to protect children because it ruins lives. It ruins childhoods. And it's every generation, they're affected more acutely and at younger and younger ages. We need to get this together. Anyways, but I want to tell you the next major pivotal point. I was still on and off, like longer stretches of eating whole foods, but still making the proverbial mistake of just one bite. Oh, it looks so good. I'm deprived. Everyone else can have it for me. And then, getting in the ditch and having to dig myself back out and get on stretches again. Anyways, at one point, I got pregnant with my daughter, Sky. And I was pretty much 95% whole food woman at that point. And I had a near perfect pregnancy of only whole foods because I thought, I am not raising a baby. It's like someone deciding to give up cigarettes when they're pregnant and then going back to it after. Like, I did not want to have any processed junk food in my body. But I went back I was a university professor when I took a 1 year off to be with Sky. And then when I went back to university to teach, I relapsed again. I was just tired. It was long days. And I was eating cookies on the way home from the university to go pick up my daughter at her daycare. And I brought her home and I nursed her. And I remember looking at this beautiful baby thinking it is one thing to bring my body down, but it is another to involve. I don't want to set this kid up for the sugar addiction. I've got to do better. And I remember just this cry out to the universe, like this pain in my heart, like, please, I need help with this. What is wrong with me? Like, I know better. I'm probably like at that point, I've read every article, every book on the topic. I think I could look anyone dead in the eye and say, if it's been written or referenced, I know about it. And why am I relapsing? And so I sort of cried out to the universe. And the next day I found out about a 12-step program for food addiction recovery, and I joined it. But here's the moment that was so incredible. I was probably in the program for about 6 months, and there was a guy whose name was not Eric, but I will call him Eric. He came in the back of the room slightly late by 2 or 3 minutes, and he was morbidly obese. And because I was in the back of the room, he sat beside me. And just to kind of really capture the transformation, Eric was in his early to mid 60s, I believe, and he was slicked in oil. He was one of the most foul smelling individuals. He was so depressed. You could see he was hanging by a thread. He had hair that was greased over, that was thin and greased over, and he sighed a lot. And at the break, because people were talking at the front, and at the break, we all swarmed him and said, welcome, you're in the right place. We can help you. It's really simple. 3 meals, whole foods, no snacks. A miracle will happen. Wait for it. And he's like, oh, no, I've tried all the diets. We're like 3 meals, whole foods, no snacks. Wait for the miracle. It will come. 6 months later, Eric's at the front of the room sharing his story. And he's like, I was on 11 different medications. I am now off 10. As of this morning, here's my blood work. And he goes, and let me show you my jeans. He goes, I can almost fit in one of the pant legs, almost. And he said, and I am no longer diabetic, and I've been diabetic for 30 years. And my jaw, I saw miracles. People coming off of the ultra processed foods, eating whole foods. I saw miracles one after another, but this was the one that struck me. It was gobsmacking. And I remember saying to the guy beside me, Ron, that can't be true. You can't reverse diabetes. Like, I don't think he's telling the truth. And Ron looks at me, he's like, if in our program you haven't reversed diabetes, within 30 to 45 days, you're cheating on the meal plan. Everybody reverses diabetes. And I was like, why is this not on the cover of the New York Times? Oh my God. Like, I just kept running around thinking, why is this not on the cover of the New York Times? This is the most incredible. So it's those moments where you think, you got to tell people, we got to spread this. People don't need to feel how Eric felt when he came into the program. And through your own practice, you see it every day. This is what's possible. This is what's possible. And how do we not, once we see it, once we know it, once we've lived it, how do we not try and share it?
Yeah. So you're going through this, you relapse, you have your daughter. I mean, at some point you're like, at some point soon, you're like, I got to become a health coach. I have to spread this message. I mean, you start, 10 years of putting on an amazing summit is just amazing. And I want to be mindful, of the amazing work that you've done, because it's not easy to get 60 amazing lecturers in one place at one time. And again, if you're listening to this, go out, look up the summit. We'll put it in the show notes. Attend, send it to a loved one, send it to somebody you care about, because this is how we're going to reverse disease. It's not going to happen from the doctors. Look at what Florence had to go through. She went to doctors. They gave her opiates and told her, have a nice day. They said, she went to the universities and they said, sugar addiction's not a thing, go home. Right? So we all have to recognize here, every story is the same. That people are curing themselves on YouTube at these summits, with health coaches and in these small little pockets. And it has to be a ground up, process. And I'm so happy that RFK is talking about it, Make America Healthy Again, right? But let's not lose the sight of what this is. Sugar, processed carbs, processed oils are poisoning us, right? I mean, it is tasty food, I understand, right? But it is causing this addiction and is causing detriment to our metabolism. And we need to wake our communities up. And I can't think of a better way to wake somebody up than attending a absolutely free summit. And I can't think of a better way to spend some money in supporting a group that is putting something together like this. So you have my 100% support. Can you tell people just briefly about how you went off into coaching? Like, because that point I think is critical. And then you're like, I need to do something about this,
Yeah, and I appreciate we're almost out of time, so I'll try and do it justice. So it was years and years later, actually, but I was watching the documentary, That Sugar Film, that's the title of it, That Sugar Film by Dr. Gaiman, it's not a doctor, by Damon Gameau, who's a celebrity movie star out of Australia. And it was the first blockbuster, big budget musical about sugar. It was literally all about sugar. And I was freaking over the moon. I thought, oh my gosh, for decades, I've been waiting for something around sugar to go mainstream, and it's here. And it was fun and it was brilliant. And I loved the film. And partway through the film, about halfway through the film, Damon is traveling America and he's in middle America. And there's this poor 18-year-old kid who had Mountain Dew put in his baby bottle. And all of his teeth had rotted by the
Oh
time
my
he was
God.
18, and they had to take all of his teeth out. Have you seen the
Oh
film,
my
Dr.
God.
Tro?
No, but
It's
I'm just horrified
it's
listening to it.
horrified. And he's this sweet kid with this got no teeth. And this mobile dentist goes through all these communities and takes everybody's teeth out because they're all rotten because they're eating sugar all day long, right from the baby bottle, if you can believe it. And Damon says to this kid, all right, buddy, you just had all your teeth removed because of all the sugar and the Mountain Dew. And he goes, are you going to stop drinking Mountain Dew now? And I look at the TV screen and I grab the remote and I said to my husband, Sean, that is crazy. He knows it's addictive, right? Like he's not going to talk about sugar and not talk about the fact this stuff is addictive. Of course, this kid isn't just going to go, oh, now that I've lost my teeth, I think I'll give up the sugar, right? Not that easy. If it was that easy, we'd all have done it a long time ago. So, anyways, so I paused the movie and I said to Sean, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do one of those summit things, and I'm going to talk about the sugar, addiction part of the sugar problem that we're all in the middle of. And so I didn't know if anyone would be on it. I remember being really nervous sending out emails. Would anyone even be a part of this? And it's just grown from there. But it was my first summit. I met a man named Jack Trimpey, who comes out of the drug and alcohol recovery field. And he has a really powerful way of breaking up with sugar, drugs and alcohol for him. And I said, could this work for sugar? And he goes, it can work for any addiction. So he taught it to me, and he coached me and he mentored me and he got me free. Like it was really amazing. So much different than anything that us had tried, which was just grind, willpower, trying to make it through cravings. And so I thought, has anyone brought this to the sugar addiction space yet? And he's like, no, I don't think so. I think you'd be the first. And he said, so go do it. So I was just doing it for free. And then it kind of caught on. And then I kept doing summits, and then I started to coach in it. And so here we are.
You like skipped over all the hard work, the formative years was like this big, long, and it's very powerful, by the way, very powerful. But you're skipping over such a dedication. We're on the same groups, we talk to the same people. I see how dedicated and passionate you are. And I'm just honored that you came out on here on a Saturday at 7 a.m., to do this. I can't wait to spread this with the Low Carb MD community. I can't wait to spread it with the Toward Health community, because I'm speaking, Brian Lenskis is speaking, amongst so many other people, much, much smarter than us.
Mhm.
So I'm so excited. And if you're all listening to this, going to say it the third time, go out and go to the summit. Thank you, Florence.
Thank you, Dr. Tro.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon by going to lowcarbmd.com.